I gotta say, I've seen this film a couple times now, but there's something very moving about it. It sort of, teared me up a little bit, just seeing all those images that went through the projector, the aperture of my buddy's brain all these years. And so many different things that I remember. I remember sitting in your apartment, the famous 104, he still lives there, and I'm not even going to tell you how much rent he pays. But it's $147. So I always want to
$4.83 a day.
Oh, 83 cents. How much?
$4.83 a day.
See, he's got a lot of extra spare time on his hands. But in any event, I remember so many great nights that would just be sitting there, and as it says in the film, he'd be Bradley's bar was right below there, and Bradley was a guy named Bradley Cunningham, who's a huge guy, and he owned the club, and he would book these like real jazz musicians, and there was a hole in James's floor that you could look down to see it, and you could see Tommy Flanagan's fingers on the keyboard, and Red Garland, the guy who played with Miles Davis, and you could just see his fingers there. We'd look at it and just feel like, where else on earth would you rather be? Anyhow, so I don't know how long we have to do this, so I'll just get this right into action here. I'm Mark Jacobson. I'm in the film. I'm very pleased by that.
I'm James Hamilton.
D.W. Young.
Judith Mizrachy, producer.
So Judith, why don't we start with you, since you're willing to be the nuts and bolts person here. Okay. So my reporting, never the most accurate thing in the universe, but my reporting tells me that this was originally your idea, that you were the first person that thought this would make a good movie. So perhaps you could inform us on why you thought that, and when you make a decision to go ahead and make a film like this, to do any kind of film really, it's not a decision that should be taken lightly, because it's going to cost you a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of belief. All that under the bridge. So perhaps you could just describe the process from the original idea, and also saying at what points you thought this is never going to work, or this is going to work.
We did have fun along the way.
I assume you did. But let's hear about it.
So I met James a long, long time ago when I was briefly the photo editor at the New York Observer. And at the time when I started there, I knew he was this amazing photographer, but I didn't actually know at that point that he had this remarkable career and how much he had shot in his life before the Observer. So, and then I slowly started to learn from other people that he was this legendary guy who had this amazing career. And I guess it was right at the start of the pandemic, I started seeing James posting photos on Facebook. He had all this time on his hands, like a lot of us, and he was going through his archive, and he was posting a lot. And not just these incredible photos, but photos with really amazing stories. So I think that was when I first started to think about that this could make a documentary, because the work is amazing, James is amazing, but he also has this way of telling stories that is great. So so we started talking about it, and I think it was the day that he posted about Hal Holbrook sneaking off the set of Creepshow I think that was the day I emailed you, and I was like, we have to know more. So we started talking about it, and I think at one point we thought maybe it would be more about film, kind of an alternate history of cinema through the eyes of someone who'd been on all these sets. But I think then at some point we had all these conversations, and it seemed more like to structure the film around the journalism, because James had worked at 5 different New York City publications as a staff photographer, and so that gave him a really unique perspective. And do you want to talk?
Yeah, I mean, you said to me in the living room, basically, like, would it be crazy to make a movie about James? I think something to that extent. And I had not even seen as much. You started showing me some of the photography, and I was totally blown away by that. And the cinema angle was obviously very appealing. I was, I think, a little reluctant about the idea of just making a photography biopic, because there's been a lot of them. But I just thought the work was so great. And then as we started thinking about just the sheer scope of the work and how broad it was, that just became such a powerful thing to me in terms of like the fact that you couldn't narrow it down almost, and that it was all with that journalistic function, and that it was done. Your history was also the history of a larger thing along the way. I thought was really powerful. Had a lot to offer, and just the images I knew we would never be short of, like powerful visual imagery. And then I think the key thing was when we all got together and met, and it just was great hanging out and talking and getting to know you, and the prospect of making a movie together to boot just was appealing, which is an important thing too.
Well, David, there's well, for lack of a better term, a kind of like elegiac feeling to this whole film. Comes from the music, and people are talking about it all the time. And actually, in the very nice review by Amy Taubin that is in today's screen slate, which every film nut reads, even if you're no longer a film nut, you still read it because they send it to you every day. So she says, she quotes you in your director's note by saying, and I think this is really kind of to the point, it said, you talked about James's music, his photographs being a portal to another age. And then you said, in an age that despite the closeness in time feels astonishingly distant. So in other words, like, I mean, most people in this room, I'm sure almost everybody in this room remembers these events, that they lived through them, yet somehow they're so irretrievably, seemingly past that, like, we can't even get to them in a way. That these photographs open that little aperture to that. And did you, when you first began to think about this movie, did you think about making this movie, which was like sort of, as Sylvia and a few other people that are sitting right around here, it was like more of a tombstone of the kind of journalism that we used to do that gave us all our self-worth?
I don't think I thought of it in quite those terms. I think just the idea of the story of that journalism being important still and worth telling, and that James exemplified it and was a backbone of so much of it at The Voice and The Observer, and he had documented it all too. And I think that was the compelling part. I mean, I never wanted it to feel like too much of a lament. I mean, of course, there's a component of that that's unavoidable, but I think the idea that it would be more of a record along the way, again, because first of all, it's James's story first and foremost, but I think he carries a lot with him because of the work he's done, just for starters. And, as an entirety, I think we talk about in the film, is that as a body of work, it's an unbelievable record of New York, of history. And so, but we just sort of tapped into James. I mean, James is really what's providing all this and what he's done. But I think the other thing is that his record, it still feels so alive and fresh and vibrant.
Absolutely.
And so that's what's exciting. What was exciting too was that, yes, it would take us back to these other moments, but in a way that never, to me, rarely feels gloomy, right? Because the photography transcends that, and that's a wonderful thing.
There's also a sense of fun in that work that several people point out that kind of ameliorate that kind of gee whiz, type thing that people sometimes feel in the current age. Seems like as soon as those planes hit that building, the 21st century really began, and we're not that crazy about it. But time marches on. Isn't that right, James?
You do?
You do. So, how long have we known each other?
75, maybe? 75, 76.
Is that 48 years I've known this guy, working with him. And I gotta say, thank you guys. Thank you guys for doing what you did, because there is this sense of those great photographs sort of passing from the view, and because Jimmy is such a maniac, and he did his self-promotional abilities, whether or not they're good or not, he certainly didn't exercise them. and you got to get this feeling that like this whole massive amount of like really brilliant stuff was passing from the scene. And I'd see all these photographs. As I said in the film, I see a lot of photographs where people are just copying James, and then when they look at James's picture, which often happens, the original is considered to be derivative, which is too bad. So like, in any event, we were talking the other day, Jimmy, and I detected a certain kind of nervousness about your personality, and in all the years I've known you, I've rarely ever seen you nervous about anything.
What was I nervous about?
Well,
How
because
was I showing?
because the movie was going to be,
Oh, the movie.
there was going to, and somehow, on some level, you were going to be exposed on a level that you never really were. And we didn't really get into it, but it was very palpable
No,
to
I've
feel
been-
that way.
Leading up to all this, I've been very placid.
Well,
But I've been having nightmares.
well, that was kind of what I was referring to.
The-
I mean, could you discuss those nightmares for us, Mr. Hamilton?
Everyone, the nightmares everyone has when they, left something running, or they forgot to do something, or something's
Big,
going to come
big test
crashing
is
down.
tomorrow, you didn't study, yeah,
Just
I get it.
The general anxiety of.
So, I mean, could you
But
add?
it's all under the surface.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, the work stands for itself. What, did you have a kind of feeling that
Well, I
somehow,
was-
because always,
I-
you held it closely to your body,
Well,
and now you're giving it out.
That's because it was, to me, it was history, but it was a personal history. It was all of it was essentially my diary, and because I chose so much of what I was able to do. Should I be looking there? Because I was
It's up
able
to
to
you, you're the
choose
photographer.
so much of what I did and had so much control over it, I felt like it couldn't have been more personal and advantageous, because plus the fact that I did all my own processing, paper, print, everything. I mean, developing and printing. It meant all the more to me,
Mhm.
because you're really living and breathing the chemicals and everything else, and so there was an ownership that. So I never really felt the need to do more than what I did for the publication I worked for. But that need was important. I really wanted to.
Well, it's really a kind of a document about a working person.
That's
You know,
true.
I mean, it's sort of like, because that's the way the film's arranged, in these kind of different chapters of your work relationship. Some of these places you obviously cared more about than others, but the thing is that there was always, the thing about you, which I've always found very moving as somebody who was a professional journalist who always demanded to be paid for my work, because I felt that, like, well, I should get something, right? So like, thank you. So like the fact that you rarely open the camera unless you were going to get some financial remuneration, that it was very moving in a professional sense. That it wasn't, it's for love, because that's what you do, and you're to find something early on that you're not only good at, but like really kind of better than anyone else. This is a powerful, powerful thing.
I think that I had more opportunities than a lot of people.
Well, you had a lot of opportunities to fail too. You didn't do that.
Well,
You came
I
through
had-
every time.
Well, as I said, I think it's because I had my own standards, and I had my own.
Don't
it
be
was- it was-
modest, man. I mean,
No,
there's a
no.
lot of people with standards.
It was my. I felt like I owned all this stuff, even though I was giving it away and publishing it. I felt like I owned it, so I had to live up to myself.
Well, in any event, there's a lot more to be said about this, obviously, and I think that the movie bears second
More than-
viewing. More than.
Okay.
And
all right.
I hear the little piano music going over here.
Sure, yeah.
So, like, I'd like to, I'd like to congratulate you guys for
Thank
doing
you.
this film about my buddy.
Thank
He
you.
certainly deserves it. And let's hear it for Judith Mizrachy, David Young, and James Hamilton. Any last words?
me, not from me, but
Okay.
people might want to ask something.
We'd like to have a, yes, definitely. Does anybody have any questions? Direct to whoever.
All were answered.
How about right there?
Yeah, I've been wanting to do. Wes Anderson and I were going to do a book similar to the musician's book about filmmakers, which would have been easy in a way. I have many more pictures of film people than musicians, but then he decided, no, we have to do the big book. And
The big book?
and I don't, which would be too big, and I don't know if it's ever going to get done. But as he said, he's been cataloging my work for years. So, I'm sorry? A box set. There you go.
But we every time we talk, we come up with like a new book. I mean, we're often coming with whole. Oh, you could do a book of this. You could do a book
I
of
know.
that. Just a lot of possibility.
Yeah, I mean,
Really gotta leave it there. I'm
Okay.
so sorry.
thank
Okay,
you.
sorry.
We got another film coming right in.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, everyone.